some point, but I haven't done it yet.
Also on the Springfield thing, we've gone from don't blame them, like the town is on hard times and don't blame them on the immigrants, to all of a sudden, like, now this week the narrative is that actually this community is revitalized and the immigrants are the reason why. There's that.
Welcome into episode 28 of the Josh Hendrickson Show. I'm Neal McCready, joined as always by the star of this show, Josh Hendrickson, the chair of economics at the University of Mississippi. It is we always have to timestamp these things in this world because you never know when someone's going to take another shot at somebody. It's 3:40 p.m. on Wednesday, September the 25th. If you're watching in the live stream, thanks for being with us. If you're listening and something has happened between now and the time that you listened, we don't have a crystal ball. We both have heads that look like crystal balls, but we don't actually have a crystal ball. Josh, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Good to be with you. There's a lot to get to. And I told you I've spent my entire day talking football, so I'm making I'm turning the page. Turning the page. I did see where President Biden was on The View today. I believe that he was compared to George Washington. They both had silver hair. I mean, there's a lot of validity to that. And I saw where Whoopi Goldberg said he was her ride or die, and she's mad about how he was pushed out, and his answers were kind of everywhere from what I saw. But I did not have a chance to really dive in deep with The View. I'm sure you did.
Well, it's shortly before his bedtime, I guess. I'm glad he could work that into the schedule.
All right. Last time we talked was this before the attempted assassination, the second attempted assassination that they're now confirming was an attempted assassination, including a letter that has subsequently been written apologizing for failing and offering a bounty to the next person who might do it if he or she is successful. We've not talked about that before? Is that right? It's been 2 weeks.
Yeah. This whole thing is wild. Right? Like I feel like actually I feel like that's what we do every time now as we go, um this is wild. This is crazy. Um I mean, but this is truly truly bizarre. So you've got this guy, and when he was first identified, you had all these people who were like posting his tweets. And you see all of these old tweets of his, and you're like, oh yeah, this guy's a lunatic, because he's like on Twitter like saying like, if you need to get to Ukraine, contact me. Like if you want to fight, in the Foreign Legion, like you let me know, like, and all these things, and you're like, oh yeah, this guy's a lunatic, right? And then like an hour later, you start seeing people finding news stories where he's interviewed about the work that he's doing in Ukraine.
I mean, first of all, what does a ticket cost to go to Kiev these days? I mean, where does this? He claims he's indigent. Where does he get the money to jet set all over the place? He's living in Hawaii. He was in Florida for at least a month. They're saying, was he living off the lam? Was he put somewhere? And I mean, he looked a little rough. I mean, I'll go there. But how did he get from Hawaii to Florida? Because you can't hitchhike Hawaii to Florida. How did he get there? That's an expensive flight. I mean, I dare say if I got on Southwest right now and I looked at flights from Honolulu to say Fort Lauderdale, this is gonna cost me a couple $100. I mean, right? I mean, he had to eat. Where did he stay? What did he do? Where did? There's a lot to this story, like the last one. By the way, July the 13th wasn't that long ago. That guy is complete. The story of that has been as incinerated as the body that they cremated within minutes, basically. That story has completely gone away. It's like it didn't happen. It just didn't happen. We don't talk about it. It's completely off the table. And now this story is not that old, and we don't really want to talk about it anymore either. Like, well, I want details of how did he get there? How did he know that Trump was golfing that day at that time? Because he got there, according to his phone records, he was there at like 1 a.m. or something like that. He was there for 12 hours. How was he not spotted in 12 hours? So I'll give you from 1 to like 7, right? It's dark. People sleep. 7 a.m. on, the sun's up. Nobody saw this guy? How does that work? And then they do see him, and now it's completely disappeared. Other than Ron DeSantis saying, "No, we're gonna charge him here. We're gonna hang on to him because basically, to DeSantis's credit, we don't really want him Jack Rubied." But then we know nothing more about him. He made a court appearance. He's being formally charged with attempted assassination. Trump's come out and said, "Hey, I've been briefed on threats from Iran, etc." There's something, like you said, there's something just weird about the whole story.
Well, and it's wild because every report that's come out since the news broke was that Trump's trip to the golf course was spontaneous.
Right.
He just decided last minute that he was going to play golf.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy was just camped out there. Now, maybe he was just camped out hoping that the president would come by, but this is it's a remarkable coincidence. And it's an even more remarkable coincidence because, like I said, when you dig into this guy's background, he's telling people, "Oh, I can get you into Ukraine," and then there are stories, and I'm not talking about stories in like some tiny little like news service that nobody's ever heard of where they interview this guy, and there are stories in the New York Times where he is quoted about his attempts to try to recruit like people from Afghanistan to come and fight in Ukraine. This is a really bizarre thing for a normal person to do. Like, in fact, a normal person can't do this.
That's my point.
A normal person can't just go to Ukraine and then set up a system where and try to recruit people to come. The other thing is then there was that Ukraine video, right? There was a video that had been put out I think by the government of Ukraine. I don't remember, but he was in it.
Yes.
I mean, so like this guy has the most bizarre backstory.
He's been interviewed by the New York Times and supposedly by one of the more credible reporters on Ukraine for the New York Times, who took him somewhat seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of want to dive into this a little bit because I know I'm beating a dead horse, but if you just decided today, you have means, you're not a wealthy man, but you're certainly not poor, you're not indigent. He declared himself indigent. If you decided you wanted to go to Ukraine and help the Ukrainians recruit whatever, Josh, that would take you some paperwork. That would you couldn't just fly into Kiev and say, "Hey, what's up, everybody?" Although I say that Zelensky flew into Pennsylvania and campaigned and got tours of our ammunition factories, and then as a reward for his trip, I think it was another $352 billion. Is that right?
300. I think it was 370 million.
70 million. Yeah. Okay, I stand corrected. Yeah. Just a tax dollar at work. We flew him around. I mean, in addition to the parting gift, that was probably expensive to fly him around on. I mean, I don't understand it. I don't understand how this is not a bigger thing.
Well, so this guy has to have come into. Now, I'm not saying. I want to be very careful here. I'm not saying that this guy is like working for somebody or something like that. I mean, to the extent that he's working for somebody, I mean, he's probably a sort of like useful idiot for somebody, because he just seems completely insane. But the thing is like to go and do what he had done, he had to have made some connection somewhere.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that he knows somebody. That doesn't mean that he is part of some intelligence service or something like that. But somebody could have found him and been like, "Hey, this guy could be useful to us," and like sort of like send him over there or something. Who knows? I don't know. But it's a really weird thing for just a regular average person to just happen to do, and to be able to be someone who is taken seriously by the New York Times, that they're willing to include your quote and a little blurb about what you're doing in the story.
Right.
And so then the guy shows up, and then, like there are all these sort of coincidences where, he's in Florida, he's at this golf course. There's, Trump is playing golf. He sort of spontaneously decided to play golf, but somehow this guy is there waiting for him. And then there are all these other bizarre aspects to it. Like what I get that they've kind of come out and said, "Hey, look, we don't do the normal thing that we do for presidential candidates that we do for a president or something like that." So I understand that maybe they're not going to close the roads, but you would think that you would at least have someone like patrolling the roads or just doing a sweep. I mean, if the guy was there for 12 hours, even if he left, his stuff was there.
Yeah, and I mean, I would like to know, what does spontaneous mean? Did he decide at noon, I'm going to go play golf, and 10 minutes later, we're on tee number 1? Or did he decide at 10 a.m., hey, you know what, I might want to play golf today. Let's set that up. I don't know how that works, obviously, for him, but I would guess that you would want to sort of clear the course a little bit, that you would want some pre-planning, that you would have to say, hey, Mr. President, we're going to need, it's fine, sir. If you'd like to play some golf, we can arrange that, but we're going to need a minute.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess that spontaneous doesn't mean you and me right now going, you know what, screw this, let's go play pickleball.
Yeah.
There's bound to be a difference. My thing is, I question the lack of reporting on this. Why is there no reporting on this?
Well, and the other thing about it is that, as though it wasn't weird enough, then you had this letter released. And the letter is extremely bizarre because we've had recently mass shooters show up, kill a bunch of people, and the media refuses to release anything that they have written. So they recover documents, journals, manifestos, whatever you want to call them, from these people, and then they don't release them. But what we're told is like, well, we can't release it because we don't want to inspire copycats, or we don't want to, um, you know, we don't want to encourage any more violence. We don't want to give them publicity, right? Like these are the kinds of arguments that they give. But then what you have is you have the United States government say, well, hey, it turns out that this attempted assassin dropped off a box at somebody's house. And in that box was a letter. And then they released the letter. And the letter is basically like, hey, I'm sorry I didn't get the job done, but, if you are willing to finish the job, like I will pay you $150,000. Now, and this is bizarre, okay, because first of all, it gets back to like, where is this guy getting money? Now, look, maybe he's just insane,
Right.
and he's just saying, "Hey, I'll give you $150,000," and he does, and he has $1, right? I mean,
Right.
maybe that's what's going on. But let's just think about this. If we can't release the manifestos of shooters because we're afraid it's going to inspire copycats, or because we don't want to give them publicity, why are we publishing a letter that is promising $150,000 if you go finish the job? Because you and I might look at that and say, okay, yeah, but like, who's going to actually do that? Like, who's going to believe that they're actually going to get $150,000? Well, crazy people. That's who, right? Like,
Right.
So you can't just dismiss this as like, oh, well, it's, like no one would think that this is credible. And so you're like, well, wait a minute. Why are you releasing this to the general public?
Right. Because if you're going to go down the road of, follow me for a minute here. If you're going to go down the road of these are always lone gunmen, they're nut jobs, these are not balanced people. Okay. Lee Harvey Oswald, you want to go down that road? Sure. Okay, fine. Nut job, upset his wife wouldn't welcome him back into the home the night before. And he went, I'll show you. I think it's suspicious, but okay. John Hinckley, Jodie Foster, you're going to know who I am. I'm going to win your love by killing Ronald Reagan. Okay. The Butler, Pennsylvania guy, just a nut, just kind of a nut, loner, no happiness, miserable kid. Okay. This guy, psychopath. You don't want to inspire more psychopaths. If your objective is, hey, let's not get the former president of the United States and a guy who right now, if you go to Vegas, is a coin toss from being the next president of the United States. I don't know. Let's not get him killed, right? You wouldn't want to publish that. So when you publish it, the question that it begs from someone is, so are you guys trying to inspire the next lunatic?
Yeah, because he dropped off a box of stuff. They didn't tell us everything that was in the box. The letter was apparently multiple pages. They only released one page.
By the way, the person that published that letter, that tweet has since been deleted.
Well, but it's been reported on by
it's everywhere. But the fact is, people are deleting it. There's that pressure's coming from somewhere to stop.
Well, and I think that what it kind of illustrates too, though, is we also have to talk about the reaction to the assassination attempt, right? So the reaction to the assassination attempt, the first time around, maybe because he was actually shot, at least in the hours and days afterwards, the media was, fairly reasonable, I guess, in their coverage. After this one, the media was completely insane. They immediately were like, well, there was another assassination attempt, but what do you expect given the way that he talks? Right? So in other words, the narrative that came out of this was, well, he has it coming. Right? He has it coming. And that was the narrative. And this is the most completely irresponsible thing that I can imagine that you're doing, because again, even if you're not trying to, you're giving people a permission structure to do it again. Because when you're sort of dismissive of it, well, yeah, look, that guy's crazy, and we can't believe this happened. But when you really think about it, Wouldn't you expect it? Listen to some of the things that he says. And it's like, what in what planet is this like an acceptable way to cover an assassination attempt on a major party candidate for president? Like that just it doesn't make any sense. The
Well,
sort of, oh, he just has it coming.
well, earlier today, Gina Raimondo, who is the Biden-Harris Commerce Secretary, so a cabinet member, she's on MSNBC. They are promoting their big interview later tonight with Kamala Harris. It's going to be a hard-hitting interview. Get your popcorn. It says Trump should be, quote, extinguished for good, end quote. All right, I'm just going to be real, okay? If you come to me and say, hey, you know what, Neal, I wish I could get you off the Ole Miss beat. Okay, you don't like my work. I wish I could get you off the podcast. Okay, you don't like listening to me. Cool. I wish you'd leave this part of the country. All right, you really don't like me and you wish I'd leave. Cool, that's fine. I wish you'd be extinguished for good. Well, now I think you want me dead.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's logical. Hey, I think you do a crappy job covering Ole Miss. Okay, that's cool. I don't want you to, I hope Rivals doesn't renew your contract. Okay. I wish they'd fire you. I wish you could, whatever. Okay. But if you say to me, I wish they'd extinguish you for good, I think any logical person would say, wow, you want me to die. She says that there's no pushback on this. Whereas that's inciting violence in my world. That's a complete different thing from her saying it is imperative that Trump not win the White House. It is imperative that Kamala Harris win the presidency. This election really, we hear that all the time. This election really matters. Please get out and vote. We need Kamala Harris. She is the best person to take America forward. That's not inciting violence. That's political rhetoric. This is not political rhetoric. This is inciting violence.
The other thing about this is that they had, they talk about the rhetoric and they're like, well, it's his fault because look at the way that he talks and look. And so, of course, this is coming. But if you look at the actual assassination attempt and you look at this guy's tweets and even his letter are full of Democrat rhetoric and talking points, like very common things that they say all of the time. Like, like Donald Trump cannot be allowed back into the White House. Like these are the things that they say. And look, I don't even think that that's unacceptable rhetoric in that case. But like the guy is repeating that like sort of like verbatim.
Right.
And then they're like, well, it's Trump's rhetoric that's really to blame here. And it's like, okay, but you realize that on the other side, they're saying these things. And in fact, like, I mean, credit to the Trump campaign because they didn't take this sitting down. Like when the media started saying like, hey, this is, Trump had it coming kind of thing. He just put out like a press release from his campaign. And the press release was entirely just, here's a list of horrible things people have said about me. Right? Like, here's a list of like, Democrats, like, implying that I'm a threat that must be extinguished, and so the thing is that there's it's not just that the coverage is ridiculous. It's not just that the coverage is irresponsible. It's that like they talk about the rhetoric and then they have people like this go on television and use that kind of rhetoric and there's no punishment for it. There's no backlash.
Maybe Kamala will be asked about this tonight. She's doing an interview with Stephanie Ruhle on MSNBC. Some might ask, who is Stephanie Ruhle? Stephanie Ruhle will be a very friendly face. She's going to interview the vice president tonight. First one-on-one network since she became the presidential nominee. It's the latest in a string of breakout moments for the MSNBC host. I'm reading. It says the host of the 11th Hour, who was wafted between pressing President Joe Biden over his octogenarian status last year to defending Harris's short on policy campaign last week. Harris defended, this woman Rule defended Harris for not doing interviews, saying that she's protecting democracy. According to reports, the Harris campaign immediately reached out to her and said, "You're the perfect interviewer for us." And by God, this is going to happen. I mean, number one, people don't watch MSNBC. The ratings for MSNBC, for CNN, for Fox News are all just plummeting. And frankly, when this election cycle's over, they're in trouble. That's the one thing you know is they're being propped up, all three of them, by this election. This election will assumedly end. When it does, and they go back to just covering stuff and policy and weather and whatnot, their audiences are getting old. Young people aren't replacing them. These networks are in trouble. So this is a big night for the MSNBC. I don't think this is going to move the needle. I do think, tell me if you agree, I don't know. I do think a lot of people see through the puff right now. I mean, I do think they want her to have to answer some questions about who are you, what do you believe, and then being pressed on those answers when she gives them. That's clearly not going to happen with Stephanie Rule.
Well, the reason that she is doing this interview is she went on like Bill Maher's show. Congrats to Bill that he still has a show.
He does.
And
she said there on that, she said, Kamala Harris is not running for perfect. She's running against Trump. We have two choices.
Yeah, and she defended it like the guy that she was, I think the guy that she was talking to is from the Wall Street Journal, and he was saying, I just want her to answer questions. And she was like, well, when you get that house in Nirvana, like, give me the name of your realtor or something. Like it would be like it would take a miracle to get this woman to answer a question. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Okay. And,
well, I mean, that is her strategy.
Yeah.
Or has been. And now so we're jumping around a little. I don't want to interrupt your train of thought. She's clearly not going to go sit down with Joe Rogan or Tucker Carlson or anyone who gets a mass audience. Forget their politics. She's not going to sit down in front of a big audience and do a real interview. And Trump, you and I think, disagree a little about what happened in the last debate, whether he won or lost or who won or lost. It didn't seem to the polling data seems to indicate that whatever bounce she got from that debate has essentially disappeared. So she's back to being in this spot where in Vegas it's a coin toss. And that's kind of where I look. We'll talk about polling data in a minute. But I do wonder, is this a sign that she and her campaign are starting to go, you know what? We're not going to be able to pull off the bunker strategy. We are going to have to talk.
Well, it's the most bizarre thing in the entire world because I can't. You have to be this Stephanie Rule woman to think that this is okay. Like, you have to have that mentality that, like, I would literally vote for anyone other than Donald Trump to think that this is okay. Like, if you want people to support you, if you want people to get behind you, it doesn't matter how bad that you think Donald Trump is. There can always be someone worse. Like, I don't understand this argument is that, like, because the argument is like literally no one could be worse than Donald Trump. Well, I mean, I think they could. Like, it doesn't even stretch the imagination to find somebody that would be worse. And so I think, like, for most people want her to answer stuff. And even the thing is it's not even necessarily about the answers that she gives. Like, what does this say about a person if you cannot put them in front of a reporter and let that reporter ask them questions? They want to be president of the United States of America, and they can't answer a question from a reporter. Like, that is a really, really bad sign, independent of the answers that you give. And, and look, I know why they're doing it. She's terrible at this. She's absolutely terrible. She does every single answer that she gives. Like, she talks in triplicate, right? Like, everything is, like, you ask her about something and she has to give 3 words always. It's like, people have hopes and dreams and aspirations. Every single time. It's 3 words that all basically mean the same thing. And she uses it, but she's filling time. She also, if you watch her when she is in like a natural environment, she talks normally. When you see her in an interview, she talks like this.
Well, that's what middle-class people do.
And it's the most bizarre thing. So I get it. I get why they hide her. But the thing is, though, is like, this is the person you're running. And like, that person wants to be president of the United States. And look, I get that there's a segment of the population that would vote for anyone other than Donald Trump.
Sure.
But I don't think that segment of the population is big enough to run this kind of campaign, because I think that there are people who are sort of like, I don't really like Trump, but I might consider voting for him. But even if I wouldn't consider voting for him, I would consider like, I wouldn't necessarily show up and vote at all. Right. And like, that person, they need to get that person out to the polls. And if you're not going to show up and you're not going to answer any questions, then you're not going to, you're not going to satisfy that. And frankly, what it indicates is something that I think I've said many times before on here, is that on the left, they actually don't care who's in charge. So for them, this isn't really that big of a problem, because it's not really about the person who is president. It's about the fact that their party will be able to control the nominations for all the cabinet positions and be able to fill all of the bureaucracy with their people. Like and then the bureaucracy will just run on, autopilot. I mean, it's a different version of what they're doing with Joe Biden. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. We just need her in the seat. She's the figurehead. And then this whole machine will just keep running with her as the figurehead, just as it ran with Joe as the figurehead.
Yeah.
And so, but people have to see through that. People have to realize that, like, no, like, actually, like, maybe you don't want to vote for the machine because the machine might be able to take care of day-to-day stuff. But what happens when there's a crisis? What happens when there's a big decision that has to be made? Who's making the decision? Because the machine can't make the decision. I mean, both literally and figuratively, it can't make the decision. And so what happens then? And people need to know that. People need to know what this person thinks and what this person is likely to do and how that person is likely to deal with stressful situations. And if an interview is enough to stress that, like, we can't, put her out there, or like she can't give good answers, like, what is she going to do if there's like, some imminent attack on the United States?
That is, to me, the single most scary thing, right? Is it's not it's where I'm bothered by media coverage. If this woman is strong enough to be the president of the United States of America, if she's strong enough to be the leader of the free world, to handle there's a lot of conflict going on right now, then surely she's strong enough to handle a reporter who asks legitimate questions, who asks follow-ups, who challenges, who questions her on not just things in the past, but more importantly, things ahead, things today, who doesn't allow her to just, like, the whole, I'm the best person to move the country forward we can't have, what did Wall say? We can't have 4 more years of this. You're in power now. So like, for example, Trump the other night, he says he's going to close down the Department of Education. He wants to disband it, send education back to the states. Whether you agree with that or not is up to you. But now that is a policy. I'd like to hear her questioned it. Her campaign put that out as, or Kamala Wynn's campaign tweet put it out as Trump just saying it, going, you see, this is, you can't, it says retweet so all Americans see this. And this is where I wonder whether she's out of touch or whether you and I are out of touch, because it's one or the other. Because I saw disband the Department of Education and send it back to the states as, yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. And I think she saw it as, oh my God, he doesn't want to educate our children. And I saw it as no, he thinks that the Department of Education has failed. It's a fairly new department, by the way. It's like 50 years old, has failed in educating our children. We're dropping across the country in math and science. They have emphasized things that your average American does not believe belongs in the schools. We're having debates over what books are in the library, over whether a child can. We're having debates, frankly, over 0.1% of America's students. Instead of having debates about, wait a minute, why are our kids struggling so badly in math compared to kids from other countries? Why is it when exchange students come to America now, the exchange year just doesn't count? They don't let it count because they have no respect for American schools. Why is that? We should be asking those questions because those are questions that affect 99.9 something percent of American kids who go to public schools, not the 0.1% who identify as a leopard and need a water bowl somewhere in the. It's like that's insanity, but we spend a lot of energy on that and not on a real issue here. So whether Trump's right or wrong, he's giving a policy here. I'd like for her to be challenged on it so she can say, no, here's where the former president is wrong, and here's how I'm going to fix American education, because frankly, it's very clear by the numbers that it needs to be fixed.
Education is going to work best when it's all local. That's when it's going to work best because the teachers, the administrators, the students, the parents, they're a part of the same community. And so if the teachers and the administrators have the ability to make decisions based on the feedback of, parents and things like that, that's going to be much better than if they're making decisions based on edicts that come down from the Department of Education on a national level. Also, we've seen that the Department of Education is actually just doing lots of awful things and promoting things that don't belong in schools. So we can we can throw that on there as well. So yeah, I'm sympathetic to this, but actually I kind of looked at this because I've started to wonder this. There's a really weird thing because there's that Twitter account. It's called like Kamala Wins or something or something. Okay.
Kamala's wins.
Yeah. And the thing about it is the only time, like I don't follow the account, but the only time I ever see the tweets is I don't ever see anybody on the left like promote it and go like, yeah, right. Like, yeah, right. Like, no, what I see people on the right promote it and be like, yeah, that's what we think. Right. Like, thank you for promoting this for us. Like it's a bizarre. And so what I kind of wonder is like, I kind of wonder the extent to which, people have drifted so far apart that actually like we just live in different realities. Because like when you have the Democratic candidate posting a video on social media about like this terrible thing that the other person said, typically that would be embarrassing to that person's side, right? Like the other candidate would want to like do some kind of correction, right? They would try to limit the exposure of the clip. Instead, they're like actively promoting the clip that their opponent is also promoting, right? And it's the most bizarre thing. And so it kind of makes me wonder, like maybe we've just kind of separated so much that we just live in completely different realities. And so to one person, they see one thing, and to another person, they see something completely different.
Oh, I think that's quite possible. That we've hit a point where we're so divided that it's maybe you can't bring the two sides together anymore. I think that's it's a sad possibility. It's a frightening possibility, but I think it's a real one. I mean, you mentioned DEI because that's one of the issues with the Department of Education, right? This is a headline today. It's in military.com. I don't know if that's a right wing, left wing. I'm just going to guess it's a military publication. The headline is Army's top enlisted leader removed diversity consideration for top enlisted roles. Army's top enlisted leader removed diversity considerations for top enlisted roles. You sent me a text. You said there are two ways to interpret this. One, people are waking up to the ridiculousness of DEI. Two, armed conflict is coming and we can't allow frivolousness when lives are at stake. I'm going to be honest, that was the one that kind of sent the chills down my spine a little bit as a father of an 18-year-old in about a week.
Yeah, I mean, so the issue with all the DEI stuff is that, like, it's not actually, first of all, it doesn't actually seem to be aimed at, like, helping anyone, right? Like, it's not like because the way that it's presented is like, I'm for diversity. Okay, like that sounds good. Okay, I'm for inclusion. Okay, well, the opposite is exclusion. So
Sure,
yeah,
yeah,
good,
right.
good. I'm for equity. Now I sort of get off the, I sort of get off the train there. But the point,
I don't really know what it means.
well, because they've turned it in. Well, that was the thing, is, see, it originally, like, I think most people just thought like equity, equality. Yeah, sure, like we're all for equality, right? But
Yeah,
then
sure.
but then people asked them to define it, and then when they started defining it, it just sounded like it just started sounding like communism, right? So
Yeah.
But
it's one of the things I'd really love to see her pressed on.
well, and so the reason,
And frankly, I'd like to see Trump pressed on it a little more.
well, the reason that I said the reason that I said what I said is that it's possible that people are waking up. Like, I think about this, like, I witnessed something when I was in graduate school. So when I was in graduate school, I had this, like,
ULM.
I had I had this professor,
Why
and
are you
he
laughing?
no, I just, we didn't meet each other. So
Okay.
the so he invited me and one of my fellow students to this event, and the event was about, so the state had just held a referendum on affirmative action in schools, and the state voted to get rid of it. Like, the voters voted to get rid of it, and so the university was going to put on an event, and they were like, we're going to bring in, like, all these, like, social science researchers, and we're going to have them talk to us about what the implications are. And so there was an economist in our department who was asked to speak at the event, and he spoke first. And when he spoke, he talked about the evidence on affirmative action, and his point was, okay, the way that affirmative action was designed is it was designed to basically, like, let's say you've got, like, two people, like, you're making a decision about who to admit. So these are, like, marginal decisions. And so you've got this group of people. And so, maybe to make things simple, you've got these two people, and they're almost identical in every way, right? And what affirmative action was designed to do is to say, okay, what, like, maybe if one of them is black and the other one is white, we'll take the black student because historically they've had fewer opportunities, and so that will be it. But his point, which is the point, is, okay, for most people, they think that's the end, right? Because now this person who historically never would have got into Harvard or something is now getting into Harvard, or, like, wherever, right?
Sure.
And so the point is that that's not the end, that's the beginning. So the question is, did that benefit that student in any way? And so what a lot of people did is, a lot of people started looking at the evidence by sort of, like, taking African American students who shared all the same kind of characteristics, but, like, one would get into the elite university and then one would get into the next step down university.
Okay.
And what they were and so
one got into ULM and one got into ULL.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Understand.
And so what they
I
would
like to put it in. I like to I like to dumb it down for the non-ULM people.
Yes, I understand.
Okay.
And so the thing is that what they found is that actually a lot of the black students that went to the next tier down, they would finish at the top of their class. They would get really good jobs. The ones that got into the more elite places, they would finish towards the bottom of their class. They might get really good jobs, but they really didn't get much better jobs than the person at the next lowest place down. And if you think about it, this makes sense, right? Because if you're just making marginal decisions, these are already people that you expect to be at the bottom of the graduating class anyway.
Because you'd rather finish in the top 5% at Ohio State than you would the bottom 5% at Harvard.
Right. And so he gets up and he presents this, and, like, that's, That's what the evidence basically said, is that like there's not actually like a huge benefit here. And in fact, for some students, it's actually discouraging, because this is like, because they were the smartest person at their high school. They might have been the smartest person ever at their high school.
Right.
Right. But now they're at like the bottom of their class at some elite university. And so they start to think, maybe I'm not that smart, or maybe I don't belong here, or maybe, and so the point is
And I would think if you have the thought go through your mind that the only reason I'm here is because I fit a quota or whatever, that becomes a demeaning thing internally, right? That's what I would think.
no, there's an economist, there's an African American economist, Glenn Lowry. He is very accomplished economist. Like, he was a professor at MIT, like, or he went to MIT. He was a professor at Harvard. But he's said this before, is he said that like that's the hardest thing, that was the hardest thing for him, is that like he's like incredibly intelligent. He's had really great jobs. But he's like, I don't want anybody to ever think that I got this because of the way that I look,
Right.
rather than like, my ability.
Right.
But so the point is I go to this event and he presents that evidence, right? And so he's kind of like, well, it's actually not really clear if there's much benefit here at all. Like, yes, they get into better universities, but like in terms of their earnings and placement in their class and stuff, it's not really clear that they're actually much better off. And he gives that speech. The next two people got up and they said, well, the voters of this state are racist, and that's why they got rid of the policy. And that's what sort of passed for their analysis, right? And I think that it's possible, you had all of these initiatives, and these initiatives sounded good and innocuous, but if you actually looked into a lot of these things, first of all, they weren't about providing opportunities. Like, they were really about, sort of like it basically became a patronage system. Let's reward our friends who do work in this area, or something like that. So if we think about the military, right, the military kind of incorporated this stuff. And so it's possible that the military kind of looked at this stuff and said, hey, I don't know that that some of these things are actually beneficial to the people that we're promoting, and I don't know if it's beneficial to the military overall, because they didn't just. The thing about affirmative action is, like, affirmative action actually, like, when you think about it, it makes sense. If you've got a choice between two almost identical people and you just have some arbitrary criteria that determines which one you pick, that's always going to be the case. Even if it's not race, it's going to be some arbitrary thing,
Right.
because they're almost identical and they're the last guy in. So it's always going to be something arbitrary. So, like, if it's race, so what?
Right.
But then the DEI stuff came along and was like, no, that's not enough. That's not enough. It's that, it can't just be these two people are identical and we're going to pick this one because they come from an underrepresented group. It was, well, you've got this person and then you've got this higher ranked person, and we're actually going to take the person and leapfrog all of these other people and things like that. And that's actually not fair to the people, by the way. And it's not necessarily beneficial to them, because if you think it's hard for the marginal person to succeed, imagine the person who's not the marginal person. It's a person that ordinarily wouldn't have been considered. Now that person is put into a position that they're not ready for. Right. And so it's possible that this is just kind of created.
And that's the word. It's not that you're not able, it's that you're not ready for it. Right.
No, that's right. You're not prepared. Yeah, you're not prepared. And it's not, and so the thing is that, look, everything that we use is an imperfect indicator. Right. But those imperfect indicators are generally correlated with other things, right? If I have like high test scores, that generally means I'm going to get good grades, right? That doesn't necessarily mean I'm smart, and it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to get good grades, but it's correlated with that, right? But when you start picking arbitrary characteristics, those arbitrary characteristics shouldn't be correlated with anything. In fact, like, if we think that people are being discriminatory, what we're explicitly saying is that characteristic isn't correlated with anything, and you're just biased, right? And so, but now you're using that criteria as a selection mechanism. So they're inevitably, you're going to get people in positions that they're not prepared for, and this is going to cause problems. So when you think about the military, it's possible that they've kind of just gone through this process and realized, like, hey, we're putting people in positions they're not ready for, and this is detrimental, and, like, we're talking about life or death here. And so maybe, like, we just need to, like, get rid of that criteria, because, we don't want to put people in positions that they're not ready for. And and so that is the optimistic take on what's going on. The other, the alternative take is that, it's time to prepare because there's lots of uncertainty in the world. There's lots of conflict in the world. And then there might be, actual conflict coming. And when there's conflict coming, like we actually, the only criteria that matters
is the best soldier. Right.
And so all the arbitrary things and anything, and that's not just like, DEI policies. That's any other thing that's favoritism, right? Like, because, that goes on as well, right? There are people who get promoted because, they just happen to be the favorite. They might not necessarily be the best person for the job. But even that stuff, right? That stuff has to go away. When you actually get down to the business of war, right? You have very clear-cut results.
Yes.
And so you have to be as prepared as possible. And if you're not, you're going to get people killed. And so you have to eliminate any criteria that you think is going to be arbitrary.
Just take the best.
Right. And so
period. Whatever that is.
And so my hope is that what this is like they tried some of these policies. They realized that, some people were in positions they weren't prepared for, and they were like, okay, like we can't make this an explicit policy, right? Like, because we're ending up with people in positions they're not ready for, and then that's creating problems, and it's creating issues, and it might be affecting morale and whatever. That my hope is that that's just what's going on. My concern is that they're kind of like, hey, we got to be prepared because things might happen, and so we've got to get rid of like all of these sort of political concerns, and we got to focus on the task at hand.
I mean, I have an idea. You could call Paul Pelosi, because the dude is clairvoyant.
He is.
I mean, let's tip one.
Yeah.
To Paul Pelosi. Listen, this guy, just a guy out in San Francisco, got attacked not long ago, has bounced back. This guy unloaded $500,000 worth of Visa stock less than 3 months before the credit card giant was slapped with federal antitrust charges. It's according to public documents. I mean, he just kind of had a feeling. He had a feeling, hey, look, this Visa thing, squirrely. I think I'm going to get rid of some of this. I'm going to cut my losses here. Visa was hit with the lawsuit on Tuesday that alleged the company has illegally monopolized the debit card market, the culmination of a years-long review conducted by the Justice Department's antitrust unit. I'm a little suspicious now. Visa allegedly used its dominant market position to penalize customers and merchants who use competing payment processors. According to court documents, antitrust cops also alleged that Visa forced financial tech firms to work with it by threatening to penalize those who don't. The disclosure form shows that Pelosi's transaction is marked SP, or spouse, a reference to her husband, Paul. This is Nancy Pelosi. You may know her. At the time Paul Pelosi sold Visa stock, there was no public indication that an antitrust lawsuit against the company was imminent. Shares of Visa closed down 5.5%.
So you say he's an average guy, but he's a generational stock picker.
I mean, listen, if you talk to people like, hey, who are the market experts?
Generational talent.
They usually just say, Warren Buffett, Paul Pelosi.
That's right.
I mean, and listen, let me make this clear. There is a ton of corruption on the Republican side with this. This is one of the reasons that I think is why I don't think we're a serious country, because there's some common sense things here. When you're in office, you can't trade. That's rule one. And two, we have term limits. Term limits in Senate, in my opinion, you can disagree. You can tell me I'm an idiot. Term limits in the Senate and the House would fundamentally take away a lot of the corruption.
Well, I think
not all.
If we want to talk about the other side, you once knew a generational stock picker. I don't know what you.
I did. I covered one.
Yes,
I covered it.
Tommy Tuberville. This guy. I don't know why he ran for office. Like, he should spend all his time picking stocks.
I mean,
Why did he coach football?
I mean, he made a lot of money at Auburn. Texas Tech, Cincinnati.
I think he could have made more money in the stock market.
He could
I mean,
have.
have you seen these returns?
I mean, Auburn had to buy him out.
Yeah.
I mean, so when they bought him out, he could have just taken that whatever millions it was and, dabbled a little here and dabbled a little there. And my guy Tommy T could have turned into whatever.
Yeah.
Daddy Warbucks.
He's, I'll tell you, I mean, that box is not going to be made out of pine. It's going to be made out of gold. So no, I think, yeah, I mean, this is a huge problem. I mean, they just have to stop,
Tommy Tuberville. I mean, the fact that he is a U.S. senator, like, signs that we're not a serious country. I covered Tommy at 2 places. I never thought he was an idiot or anything, but I never once thought, you know what you are as a future senator? Nope. Now, he was cutthroat. He was cutthroat. He fits in Washington, both sides of the aisle. But in this should be an issue, right? This should infuriate, right? I have 2 things here. This should infuriate the American taxpayer. That here we have people that are literally having to make decisions about how to feed their family. And these people are clearly inside trading, making millions and millions of dollars off of inside information. And it's obvious that it's happening and nothing happens to them.
Well, I mean, the solution to this is that they should all have to put their assets into some blind trust.
Yeah.
And so somebody should have to manage that for them, or they just leave it as is. I mean, leaving it as is may or may not be a good idea, depending on how long you're in office. But yeah, I mean, they should go into some kind of blind trust, and they shouldn't be able to make trades. Like it's preposterous because you see them, and there are just too many of them who here's the way to look at it. There was an advocate, like there was a guy, Burton Malkiel. He was an advocate of like the efficient markets hypothesis. It's the idea that like you can't beat the stock market, right? Like if you just invested in the overall market, like that's the best you can do. Like you're never going to beat the market. And so the way that he used to test this is that he would look at the distribution of returns of all of the like mutual funds and things like that. And he would say, okay, look, some of these guys are going to beat the market occasionally, but some of them are going to underperform the market. And that but the thing is that it should follow a normal distribution. Most people should actually be right at the sort of market average.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at those papers that he wrote, this is actually what you find. What you find is that, people are concentrated at the average. And yeah, there are people, on the tails of those, of that distribution, but the people in the right tail, the people who are earning excess returns, first of all, once you account for like the fees that they charge, you're not really beating the market. But then also like once you, but also you can't rule out that it's just entirely due to luck. But then you look at Congress, right? And so Congress is like, there are members of Congress who appear to be even better than the mutual fund managers. And that's their job, right? And so it just, it's not believable.
I've got notes on things I want to get to, and we're already at an hour. And I love this headline. We're just going to touch some headlines, okay? We're going to touch some headlines. This is great. I love this one. Thanks to everybody in the stream, by the way. Grind has a good question. I'm going to get to Grind's question in a minute. I'm not ignoring you. Thanks to Austin. He says, I love the show. Please hit the like button. Tell your friends. Retweet, all that stuff. We appreciate the kind words. Bloomberg, UK. I'm not making this up. Tim Walz's masculinity is terrifying to Republicans. Subhead. Kamala Harris's running mate has traditional, quote, manly man, end quote, traits. He's also not frightened of women, afraid of black people, or terrified of the future. What? What?
First of all, I like that they had to. I like that they.
I mean,
I like that they treated this like each of those was an allegation that he was fighting against. Like, he's afraid of the following groups
yeah.
of people.
Okay, let's go through this. Who are we saying is afraid of women? I assume this is a shot at JD Vance.
I guess.
Is there anything that indicates
Although he's married to a woman.
He's married to a woman and they have little ones. So
what is a woman?
That was a topic of conversation not long ago. But when a man loves a woman very, very much, that's happened a couple of times at least. So
I don't know. Tim Walz shakes his wife's hand though, so I don't know.
It's a good point.
Did you see? By the way, I know the turn the page thing. Okay, the turn the page thing. First of all, this is like I don't know a single man who saw that video that wasn't like scarred in some way, because the turn the page thing. Did you see his wife's eyes when she does the turn the page thing? Like if you pause the video when she does the turn the page thing and you just look at her eyes, they scream run. Like just run. Like she has crazy eyes, which is not surprising.
Yeah, Grind says this will be the most locked into a VP debate he thinks he's ever been in his life. I refuse to miss this. Like the whole Trump-Harris debate thing, I don't care if they debate or not. This debate, I need to see it. Because, so if you go down the line on this, I'm either you're accusing Trump or Vance of being, quote, afraid, not terrified, I'm going to get it right, afraid of black people. I mean, there's no sign of that. There's no sign that any of these people are racist. I mean, J.D. Vance is married to a woman of Indian descent. He's not a white supremacist. A white supremacist would not marry a woman of Indian descent. There are plenty of white supremacists out there. They exist. They don't marry women of Indian descent, Josh.
Well, the other thing is, okay,
I mean,
let's say
J.D. Vance, this J.D. Vance thing really bothers me because J.D. Vance, no matter what you think of him, okay, J.D. Vance does sort of represent the American dream. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying you should vote for him. You should not vote for him. Maybe you don't like his politics. That's fine. That's fine. But his story is kind of emblematic of what the American dream used to be. Kind of came from nothing, had some hurdles that were not of his making that he had to overcome. He kind of did it. He rode his intelligence. He went to Ohio State, did really well. Made money, a lot of money, frankly. Married, had children. His children, no matter whether he wins the vice presidency or not, his children will live a level higher than he grew up. That's American fundamental dream stuff. And the way he gets vilified in the media, and it seems to be working because he does not poll well, favorability, unfavorability. People really skew his words and all that kind of thing. I view that as like, whoa, why are we going after him so hard? Like, you want to go after Trump and go, hey, Trump's twice, thrice divorced, whatever it is. You know, the whole Melania's not with him. There's a lot there. I'm like, okay. I mean, okay. You want to pick that apart and go, maybe Trump's not the best role model ever? Okay. I mean, there's a lot there. On the other side, someone would go, look at his kids, man. When you see someone's kids and the people's kids are sharp, that's usually a pretty good sign. And his kids appear to be just sharp off the chain. His grandchildren are impressive, etc. But if you want to pick him apart, good. There's not a lot to pick apart on Vance, really. And I'm not talking about his politics. I'm talking about the guy. And when he gets attacked like that, it kind of like, I go, whoa, what is this? Because if we're going to start shooting down the American dream, we're getting into some kind of scary places to me.
No, see, I think this is much different.
Okay.
I think what this is because it's a personal attack on him, and it's a bizarre personal attack, but it's not aimed at you and I. It's not aimed at you and I.
Okay.
It's aimed at people in those circles. It's designed to make him look like a class traitor. Like, look at all that we did for this guy, and now look what he's doing to us. That's what it's really about. Because the attack, we hear the attack as an attack on the American dream because they say, like, oh yeah, like I don't know, a bunch of um, I didn't grow up with anybody who went to Yale or something like that. Like that's their go-to line. And I don't think it's designed to denigrate the American dream. I think what it's designed to do is it's designed to send a message that, like, hey, look at all we did for this guy and look how ungrateful he is. Right? Because he's not over here with us. And like, he's not really one of us.
Right.
And no matter what he achieves, he'll never be one of us. And I think that's really what it's about.
Okay, well, you just insulted Walls' masculinity.
I would like to point out, by the way, that there is research that shows that the lower your testosterone, the more likely you are to vote Democrat. Is
that right?
Trust the science.
Axios headline: Trump holding far fewer rallies than in past. It's like, well, yeah, he's getting shot at. All right, and then let's start to get to the final topic. We got a super chat from Austin Blancett. Austin, thank you. He says, would love both of your thoughts on if there's a realistic scenario where the election ends in a 269 tie. If Trump gets Nebraska 2 and she wins the Rust Belt, what does the country look like if it happens? I mean, in that world, it goes to the House. And there is a constitution that lays out what to do in that situation. It would be chaotic, certainly. You may have studied the polling data and the scenarios more than I have. Yeah, it's possible mathematically. I mean, Vegas right now has the odds somewhere around 50-50. The most recent polling data, I pulled some up earlier. It's kind of all over the place, and it was one of the questions I had for you. So I guess I'll let you answer that along with this as I say it. Is there any polling data that you're paying attention to? Do you trust any polling data? I get this question a lot from people, and I don't really know the answer. Some of the polling data will show, like, there was some polling data that had her up big, and then some recent polling data from the New York Times had Trump starting to take leads in some swing states. And my response, I think, was finally, hey, I don't know. I mean, there are some political people out there who look at some numbers, and I don't know whether this is accurate or not. It's interesting. They look at numbers in states where Harris is going to win, and they look at where Biden ran in 2020, where Hillary Clinton ran in 2016, versus Trump. And in those states at this same time, those people, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, enjoyed double-digit leads in those states in the polling data. And Harris, her lead in polling data in those states right now is more like 3 points, 4 points. And there are a couple of political people that I listen to or that I follow because I think they're interesting who say, look, if this data is accurate, and that they admit polling data is harder and harder to get right because people don't answer their phones. If this data is accurate, it's probably not a good sign for her. That for her to win the White House, realistically, she's going to have to win the popular vote by 4 or 5 points. If the election is truly 50-50, she probably will not win based on swing states.
I think if you look at a lot of the swing states, they're actually trending in Trump's direction, even if he's behind. The other difficult thing, so I try not to look at any individual poll because they're all, first of all, they're all over the place. Second of all, the timing is all different. So usually I look at averages. Like Real Clear Politics has,
that's what I was pulling up right now,
has averages, and they do the average polls. But the other difficulty here is too, though, is that when somebody is as unpopular as Trump, he tends to overperform his polls. And the reason he overperforms his polls is that some people don't tell pollsters that they're going to vote for him because they think there's a stigma associated with voting for him. So he tends to um, perform his polls. And if he overperforms his polls, then anything where he's even like -2, like you can consider that a possible victory.
So, Real Clear Politics right now, as of this moment, roughly 5 o'clock on Wednesday, has Harris up 2.1 overall, has Trump up 0.2 in the battleground states. Now they mess with me. Don't change the screen on me like this, people. Let me refresh. Okay, here we go. No, I don't want that in my daily box. Has Trump up 2.1 in Georgia. Has Trump up 0.7 in North Carolina. Harris up 0.6 in Pennsylvania. Trump up 2.2 in Arizona. Harris up 1 in Wisconsin. Harris up 1 in Michigan. So essentially a toss-up. It's polling data, realclearpolitics.com. Betting odds, Harris has, according to the Vegas right now, 51.4% chance of winning. So we're coin tossing.
But I think like the other difficult thing here is, and this is why everybody got it wrong in 2016, is that,
By the way, to finish that, as of this moment, they are projecting that the Republicans will win the Senate. We'll have 52 senators. And then in the House, they are projecting that in a generic, I'm looking for this. I don't know. I'll have to figure that out what that says. I honestly don't know what that says.
well, I think the other thing though is that one of the reasons that they missed big in 2016 is a point that actually like Nate Silver was making, which is that like everybody treats each individual state as kind of just independent of one another. And his point is like if you look historically, like there are certain states that like there are certain swing states that tend to kind of like move together, right? So from election to election, like yes, they're swing states, and yes, they go back and forth, but they're kind of correlated over time. And I think like essentially most of the swing states are kind of like that. And so you have this, you know, so to me, I mean, if it ended in a tie, I think like, you know, the House would pick Trump. I think they would have, I think they might want to pick somebody else or right. Like they might not like be thrilled that it's Trump, because I'm still not convinced the Republican Party is entirely on board with that, but like they would have to pick Trump. But I do think that there's a chance that it's very close, but I also think there's a chance that like, you know, that the winner gets, you know, 320 to 335 electoral votes. And then that's not really all that close at all, because I think they all break one, you know, like it's conceivable that a lot of these states all just break one way.
You want to create your own map? So they have in this one, they have, you need 270 to win. So they took away toss-ups and did all the solids and stuff. They've got Harris, Walz at 276, Trump, Vance at 262, which shows you how close that is, because if you just change Pennsylvania, it's over. Trump wins. Literally, it's that simple.
Well, and I think actually, I mean, I think that you're seeing this. So
if you put Pennsylvania in a toss-up, neither one win. You want to play this for a minute?
Sure.
Give me we generally know the states. We got Arizona going to Trump right now. It's got North Carolina to Trump, New Mexico to Harris. We got Pennsylvania as a toss-up. We got Wisconsin going to Harris. Michigan, what's Michigan going to do? You're a Michigander.
Probably going to be Harris.
Okay, Michigan going to Harris. In that scenario, this thing is as simple as Pennsylvania.
Well,
the winner, Pennsylvania, wins the election.
Well, and I think if you look at what's going on, this is kind of what I think on the last show when we were talking about the debate, I said that Harris is Harris's performance, certain answers that she gave seemed to indicate that they felt like they were really strong in Michigan and really weak in Pennsylvania. And if you look at what she's done over the last couple of weeks, is she's focused essentially all of her attention on Pennsylvania. Like she's in Pennsylvania constantly. And so I think that they recognize, I think based on their behavior,
Yeah.
they don't think that they can win the election unless they win Pennsylvania.
Well, they can't.
Yeah.
Because and even here, I just gave her Pennsylvania and then put Michigan in Trump's count, and now Trump wins again.
Mm-hmm.
If you give Trump both Michigan and Pennsylvania, it starts to be a runaway.
Well, and there are other states too. Like, I mean, I think Virginia is going to go for Harris, but like Virginia's been trending towards Trump like the last month.
Right,
it's getting closer.
This was not a likely scenario, but let's do it. Let's give Michigan and here's what's wild. This is where Harris, her path, they both have narrow paths.
Yeah,
but this is not realistic. But Michigan and Pennsylvania go to Harris, and let's give Virginia in a shocker to Trump. He wins the White House.
Well, and that's the thing. Well, when I talk about correlations, like I think like Wisconsin and Michigan are going to go to the same person. Like I think that they'll be won by the same person, and so it's possible they both go to Trump. It's possible they both go to Harris. But the point is like those states, there's some correlation between how they there's some positive correlation between how they go from election to election, and so there's a little bit of that too, where it's like, well, you can't even necessarily isolate individual states, because if you told me that that Trump won Michigan, then I would say, well, then he probably also won Wisconsin, right? And so, I mean, I think that, I mean, when I look at the map, like I still see it favoring Trump. I still see it favoring Trump. I think that he, I think it's very, very hard for her. Like, I think the reason that her campaign is struggling and why they have all of these weird sort of campaign strategies where it's like, well, I wasn't in charge, but it's good that I was, right? And then you have like little slip ups because they're like in politician mode where they're so used to using certain lines when they're, when attacking incumbents. And she's trying to position herself as not the incumbent. And you have people like, then you have Tim Walz come out and say, we can't afford 4 more years of this, like of Joe Biden. Right. Well, we're not getting 4 more years of Joe Biden. And also, by the way, his vice president is your running mate.
Right? Yeah. And he has not helped her at all.
No, I don't think so.
In fact, he's hurting her. They're going to win Minnesota, but he's hurting her in Minnesota. They're going to win by less in Minnesota than she would have won Minnesota had she had, say, Shapiro on her ticket. All right, last thing. Grind, one of our absolute best participators, great dude. He says, good question. He says, will the Democrats go through a greater restructuring process if Harris loses versus the Republicans restructuring after Trump? Do they think they need restructuring?
I don't think so. I think that if she loses, the lesson is going to be that they just kind of got screwed by Joe Biden's health. Because I think that they have people that could beat Donald Trump, but that they can't run because they had to go with Harris. And so I think that they're not going to – the lesson that they'll draw is bad luck, right? Like we thought we could do it with Biden. We waited too long, couldn't do it. We had to go with Harris. She was a weak candidate. That's why we lost. It's not really about the party. It's not really about our message. It's not really about what we have to offer. It's just about her. And they'll move on. And they'll just and they'll try to promote some of these other people. And in fact, I mean, I think that even like the choice of Tim Walz, like I get that like there were these reports that like her and Shapiro didn't really get along, and I get that there are reports that like they were concerned about his support of Israel.
I don't want you to miss this, just in case. That's Kevin Alcantara. He's getting ready to make his Major League Baseball debut. He's an absolute freak. He's one of our next great hopes. Next great Cubby hope.
That's all we have, though, is hope.
That's it. Hope doesn't take you far. Not to interrupt. I just didn't want you to miss this moment.
But no, I think even the choice of Walz was kind of a concession to that point of like, I think we got a weak candidate. Like, Walz was never going to be anything. Like, I don't think they expect him to, even if she won, I don't think anybody expects him to ever run for president. So I think that that choice was like, well, we don't want to take one of the heavy hitters that we think we have and have them take a loss or a potential loss. So I don't think they go through
I have
any
thought
kind of
I have thought that too.
Yeah.
That when they ran her, it's pretty obvious that's not who they wanted to run. And I think I don't know. Look, I've said this many times. They are much better at once the game starts. They play to win. They play to win. I mean, they play to win. They watch the film, and if the film says run the ball, they run the ball. They run the ball. They don't. They throw the passing attack completely out. They'll run it, and they'll get after you. And if they think they can get away with some holds here and a clip there, they'll do it. And that's where they're different. And it's where the Republicans, frankly, will be tested. I will be fascinated to see what the Republican ground game is, all that stuff, because if everybody's right and this thing is super close, it's going to be tenuous. If it's a blowout and he wins in some blowout fashion, then we will know officially that like the polling data just doesn't hold up anymore. What I was going to say a minute ago and I forgot was that there are a couple of the political people that I kind of find interesting who are kind of quietly saying this thing has a 2016 feel to it, where it's kind of like this silent majority that doesn't really say it out loud, but that you'll see it closer to the election and certainly on election day where people are really motivated to vote. And there is some polling data that is worrisome for her that's out there where you talk to voters, who do you think you'll vote for? And they say, I'll vote for Harris or whatever. How likely are you to vote on a scale of like 1 to 10? And they're in the 6 range. Trump's, who do you think you'll vote for? People that say Trump, how likely are you to vote? Like an 8. And there are some of the people that study these things say it's a valid statistic to watch, that it's a real thing, that if you're not motivated to vote and Tuesday rolls around and you got a headache or little Johnny's sick or it's raining outside or it's cold outside or you had a shitty day at work, you got a flat tire. I mean, life, right?
Yep.
That you just go, screw it. I do not have time to go wait in the line for an hour and a half to vote. Right? I don't have time to do it. I'm not doing it. The babysitter got sick, all that, whatever. As opposed to, I don't care what happens to me today. If I have a pulse, I'm voting. And I remember the two that I remember the most. 2008, you didn't need any polling data. You could turn on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, PBS. I don't care. There were people lined up for hours to vote for Barack Obama. He was winning. You didn't need election. And in 2016, I'll never forget it. We were doing the podcast that morning, and I turned on CNN. At the time, we just had one screen, and I started flipping. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, CBS, ABC, NBC. And they're showing in Michigan and Ohio and Wisconsin these lines of what appeared to be blue-collar people. And it was like, they're voting for Trump. These people are lined up for 4 hours to proudly vote for Trump. And I was still in the post-Cubs win the World Series euphoria, and so I didn't think much about it other than, hey, did you know the Cubs won the World Series just a few days ago? Looking back on it, that was a big sign. It was, oh, wow. And, we didn't get that in 2020 because of the COVID and all the silliness. But it's one of the things I'm watching for is on Election Day, what do the lines look like in Michigan and Ohio and Arizona and North Carolina and Georgia? Are people, how motivated are they to vote?
Well, and I think that I think I told you this before. I remember in 2016, my dad kept telling me, I think Trump is going to win. So my parents live in Michigan. Mm-hmm. My dad kept telling me, I think Trump is going to win. And I was like, no, like, everything says that he's not going to win, right? Like the polling suggests he's not going to win. Yeah. There are all these models that say that, that,
he had
you
like
know,
a 28%
yeah.
chance according to the models.
And I said, like, I mean, it's possible that he wins, but like, and his argument is he's like, no, you don't understand. Like when I drive around, I see Trump signs everywhere. And at first I was like, okay, but like, that's not a random sample, right? Your drive, like your drive is not a, that's not random. And
you're not crossing the country, Dad.
And he was like, and he goes, no, but you don't understand. And he was like, I never see signs for Republicans like around here. And he's like, and I see Trump signs. And he's like, and that's different. And he's like, and so like, I think he's going to win. And look, I mean, he turned out to be right. Yeah. And where they live, it's like very, very strong, like union membership and stuff like that. I mean, I do think it's significant.
That was significant.
I think it's significant that the Teamsters didn't endorse a candidate because that's basically an endorsement of Donald Trump.
Right.
That
their membership simply really wouldn't allow a endorsement of Harris was significant because it told you that those people are going to get out. And I think the numbers are showing like in the 70-something% for Trump.
And I think the other issue is like Trump is so hard to poll because of the stigma about Trump. Like there's such a stigma about being a Trump supporter that like actually in 2016, the pollster who did the best was the guy who he asked people 2 questions. Who are you voting for? And who are your neighbors voting for? Mm-hmm. And the results were so different. The results when he asked who are you voting for, it was like it was pretty close, but it was like Hillary. But when he said who you think your neighbors are voting for, like it was like Trump, and it was fairly significant margins in some cases. And it's because it's because if they're talking about his theory is that if they were talking about their neighbors, then the stigma goes away because who cares if the neighbor has a stigma?
Right.
Let
them deal with it.
Yeah. And so yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to predict, but if I had to predict now, I would say Trump's going to win. And I would say, he could potentially get, 320 to 330 electoral votes.
Be a wild night if that happens. That's for sure. There will be a lot of, that would lead to a lot of questions. It'd be fascinating as we get closer. What are we, 6 weeks away? Less than 6 weeks? Something like that. All right, we will. I'm gonna talk to Josh in a minute. I've had some people going, "Hey, can you guys do weekly?" And I don't know. His schedule's very busy. My schedule's busy, but we'll talk about it. We'll get back with you soon. I'll announce it. I'll try to give some notice. But thanks to everybody in the stream, Austin, Grind, Tim, everybody for being part of the show. We really appreciate you. For Josh Hendrickson, I'm Neal McCready. Until next time, take care.